Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Talents Unlimited Toastmasters. We meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. virtually and soon to be hybrid. Tonight we have an interesting topic, and I know you've heard of this before, but how good are you having a conversation? Whether it's at work or whether it's day-to-day life at a personal level. Does the cat got your tongue? It's a playful and a jokingly phrase that we're all aware of. Cat got your tongue. But there's a lot more truth to it than you know. Conversation is a foundation of how we as humans connect. And that connection can either lead to success or lack of conversation, if that cat has your tongue, to some conversation that may not go so well after all, or that first impression. So having that conversation can lead to great personal relationships and even achievements, whether it's career or personal. So cat's got your tongue. Carolyn, cat's got your tongue. What are some of the negatives if a person is unable to express themselves when that cat's got their tongue?
When you say negative, do you mean when they cannot have a conversation?
Yeah, they just can't get the word out. It could be a multitude of reasons why. They could be, let's say, they don't know enough about a topic or other type of, you know, just the negative aspects of not being able to have that conversation.
Well, a negative aspect would be that a person is unable to communicate. It would be a lack of communication. I find that a lot of people can communicate if they listen, because part of communication is listening. Some people talk more than they listen. And my pet peeve, and a lot of people do it, I just don't. Some people use more words than are necessary to get their point across. And when I say that, that means they go on and on and on when they can simplify the explanation. Point in people to me that talk more than they should sometimes are salespeople, because sometimes they give you too much information. When I want to buy something, my bottom line is how much does it cost? And then you can tell me the benefit, and then I can decide whether I want the product or not. In my mind, if I've already decided I'm gonna spend a certain amount, that's all I'm gonna spend. So I don't care what the product can do. It can fly me to the moon. If I've decided it's not cost effective, I'm not gonna buy it. And I really do not want to listen to your sales spiel. So the negative connotation would be not communicating with your chosen audience, because there are some people who like to hear people talk and they like for people to tell them everything before they make a decision. So know your audience. When you're having, even when you're having a conversation, know your audience, know what they like, what may offend them when you're talking to them, and that you're better able to communicate and they're better able to comprehend what you're talking about.
Yes, I hear what you're saying about salespeople, and I know that, you have a product line that you try to communicate to others and express the benefits. Sometimes we have a not so good situation, and I know Jimbo here can tell us a little bit about having that conversation during conflicts. So, Jim, how can having a conflict kind of tone down a conflict?
You know, it goes back to the stuff Carolyn was talking about. And she touched on the most important piece of it at the very end when she talked about comprehending. You're going to have a conversation. A conversation is a two-way street, and it's not just somebody talking. The receiver has to listen and understand. You don't have that understanding, it's out the window. And this is what usually happens in most conflicts. Person A says blah 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 blah. Person B says blah blah blah, blah. And all of a sudden, neither one of them are talking anymore because they're self-centered. Their blind sight is just on what they want to see, and that's it. And then you get these things called mediators, right? So a mediator steps in, and then ask a leading question to A and asking a leading question to B, and then all of a sudden you find out what the real issues are because such and such isn't happening, or such and such went wrong the wrong way, and there was a misunderstanding. And if you can find out what that misunderstanding is, you can smooth any conflict. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to be able to understand. So you have to be able to talk to pieces of.
Mhm. Meaningful dialogue is what I'm getting from you. Understanding. There are probably a lot more that we have in common that we know of. Of course, there's one way we can do it, and that is getting to know one another. But having that dialogue and having a conversation, I would imagine we probably have more in common than we realize, and a good starting point. Of course, we won't agree on everything, and none of us will, but having that dialogue is having trying to get to that starting point. And Carolyn, and you are right. It's about listening as well. It's not only about speaking, that's for sure, right? You're having a conversation. Can you have a conversation and, let's say, get an impression from a conversation just by nonverbal communication?
Oh,
You
sure.
can. Sure you can have a conversation and get an impression because the body language, nonverbal communication speak volumes. If you're talking to somebody and they have their arms crossed, they may have a certain expression on their face. They may be sitting rigid or stiff, forward in their chair, or not even sitting back in the chair. So a lot of nonverbal communication, you get a lot from that.
It's not even I mean, just your stature and the way you hold yourself. You you and I work together over at Boston, and you see how sometimes when I walk into a room, people will just uh-oh. I mean, you get this big guy that walks into a room, right? I mean, I may only be 6 feet tall, but I'm almost 300 pounds. I'm rather large. And it just walks in and goes straight to the front of the table as if I own the table. And then people just quiet, just automatically just sit down and they stop talking and they're waiting for me to lead something. So sometimes it's just the stature and just the way you hold yourself sends out different vibes. It doesn't surprise me when people say I'm very intimidating, especially with these tattoos.
Yeah.
Oh, you
So you
think about it. You walk into a room, you walk up to the table, and you put your fist down on the table like this. Everybody is intimidated, right?
So the cat's got their tongue, huh?
Hey, well,
You know, think about this. We go to a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, I go to a restaurant, we go to a restaurant. How many people really, because they don't know how to converse, that they may accept a meal or with some shortcomings, or perhaps they overreact when something's maybe a little bit off just because they don't know how to converse. So
well,
I think it happens a lot more.
Well, I think when people's expectations are more, when they go to a certain restaurant, they may have higher expectations than the restaurant can give. And also people that like I say people order stuff that's not on the menu. You want to change stuff around. Like people when they order a hamburger, you don't want this, you don't want that. You want this and that. That's not even on the menu. They don't even make it, this is not how, you get the wrong thing because that's not what they serve. That is not their specialty. When you go to McDonald's, they have specialties. You can't get it your way. It's not Burger King. And it's not a gourmet burger place. So sometimes people expectations.
it's funny that you mentioned expectation because I think when you getting into conversations about things, so you could be doing it at a restaurant, you could be framing it in terms of work, you can be framing it in terms of what the future is going to be like. But the whole concept of managing those expectations on the person who's you're conversating with comes into play. And if you can manage the expectations, you can make that conversation go really smooth. And if you don't manage those expectations, you're going to have those conflicts that we were talking about a little while ago. Simple little things like, oh, do it without ketchup. Sorry, this is the way it's done. You can't change it, right? So if you have the clash to begin with, then the clash is just going to grow and grow, and you have to be able to manage expectations to eliminate the clash.
Exactly. When I go to a restaurant, one of the first things I do is, hey, they ask, how's your day going? I say, my day is going great. How's yours going? And because expectations, or they just think you're another Joe here to get a meal. But sometimes just having a that icebreaker, if you will, with a host or hostess, could make their day a little bit more ease where they just aren't rushing. I don't when I'm at a meal, I'm not rushing for anything. And I have a conversation with the host or hostess, probably more than what I should, but nevertheless, it's to get a feel about expectations, and if something's not right, then there's a little bit more room to play with of having that conversation. I'll give you an example. It's not restaurant related. How many times have you always heard about an individual and you form a conclusion about a person? This guy's a knucklehead, he or she's a knucklehead, and you never spoke with the person. You're not getting anything firsthand. Not that you need to go out and approach a person that, what I heard you did this, but you don't even know the person because you've never had an interaction with that person whatsoever. So you're just taking the word of somebody, the one-sided opinion that people draw. You draw a conclusion without even having a conversation with a person, just to even get to know them and know how they think. You ever had that happen, Jim?
I have not, let's see, how do I put this? I have not had it happen to the point where I prejudge somebody.
Mm.
I learned early in life that if you prejudge things, you're likely to be wrong. And if you take other people's opinions without doing the experience yourself, you're probably wrong. So I tend to have the conversation. I tend to talk to people without regard of what other people told me. And then I formulate my opinion based on what they say. Now, if it happens to coincide with what the other people do, then okay, all right. Well, this guy was right. Uh, But most of the time, I found them to be wrong. I mean, come on, we just go back to myself. Right? How many times have you heard people say, "Oh, when I first met Jim, he was very intimidating, but then when I got to know him, he's really a teddy bear." I mean, it just happens. So,
What do you think, Carolyn? What are your thoughts on that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sometimes without ever having a conversation with an individual, we always hear secondhand how a person may or may not be without ever even conversing with that person that somebody's sharing a thought about. And they get the wrong opinion. Jim just explained that generally speaking, not in all cases, but generally speaking, that the person's wrong because they've never experienced that interaction with a person. So have you ever had that kind of a experience?
Well, my experience is that people's relationship with the person colors their view of the person. Without having a relationship or conversation with the person, you cannot accept how the other person feel or view that person because that's their perception based on their interaction. So normally I do not accept what other people say about people because that's their perception based on their relationship and interaction. I have to base my relationship on my interactions and my conversation with the person. So I rarely believe what a person says about anybody because that's what they believe. It's not necessarily how the person is, as Jim said, because they didn't know Jim, so they just saw him from the outside.
Mhm.
So sometimes just from the outside, it's like judging a book by its cover and never read the book. So I don't judge people by their cover. I try to get to know them and see who they are.
One benefit with respect to Toastmasters and conversation specifically is table topics and impromptu questions. When you have a conversation, you're not given a speech. What I mean by that is in public, if you're talking about anything at work, unless it's a presentation, obviously you might be practicing that. But if you're presenting a status or just interaction with any individual, it's impromptu. If I was a manager uh, and I had an employee, I'd say, hey, he or she, how's it going? What could I do to help? And that cat's got their tongue. The cat has their tongue. So, and they don't know how to convey their feelings or convey their challenges. You could have a lot of things that can go wrong, especially at a personal level and day to day, because everyday life is impromptu. You don't have a prepared speech for the questions or requests or what you may be requesting. Any thoughts on that of impromptu and how Toastmasters can help in that conversation daily, that daily conversation?
well, I think people tend to forget what public speaking is. Well, there's a difference between public and private. Okay, so if you're private is you're in your own home and you're dealing with your own stuff, right? But the moment you walk outside of that home and you interact with someone else other than your family, you are publicly speaking. Even if you just say hello to the mail person, you're publicly speaking. You're out in public and you're talking to somebody. And when you do these, it's always going to be impromptu. It doesn't matter where it is. You go to the grocery store, you say, you put the stuff on the counter and you greet the checkout person, right? The one that's doing the checking at the groceries. You always say hi, don't we? How you doing? Have a good day, right? You start some sort of a conversation and you get stuff going. This is what public speaking is all about, and this is what Toastmasters is supposed to be addressing. So they do two different things. They do the prepared speech for your ceremonies, and they do the impromptu for your everyday life. And you're supposed to take these things that you learn in Toastmasters and go outside of Toastmasters and use them in your real life. If you're not taking those skills that you learn here and use it in real life, then what are you learning here? If you're not going to use it everywhere, what's the sense in learning it?
Good point. Good point. Here's something that we all run into. And for our audience, I want you to think about this for a second, especially at your place of employment or even just walking down the street. How many times you have walked either at work or in a public place down the sidewalk, and when you have two individuals coming to one another, their eyes go down instead of saying, good morning. Of course, you don't have to carry a conversation, but just that icebreaker comment that could make somebody's day. Good morning. And if they say, good morning, how's your day? Good. All right. See you later. Have a good day. How much of a difference would that make in somebody's day? What are your thoughts on that, Carolyn?
Well, it makes a difference. But I had this experience at work. We had a supervisor, and sometimes she would come in and not say good morning or smile. But what I realized later on, the reason she did not that she did not see us and she wasn't happy to see us and didn't want to say good morning, she had a 2-hour drive in rush hour traffic. She had to get her kids to school and then come to work and try to be on time because AT&T is a stickler for being on time. So when she got to work, she was a little frazzled. She had some anxiety. Was there going to be a wreck? Am I going to make it on time? So what I learned is sometimes when people don't say good morning or acknowledge you, it's not about you. It's not that they don't see you. It's not like they don't want to acknowledge you or even say good morning or smile. Their mind is somewhere else. Not about you at all. Sometimes when people are walking and they hold their head down, it may be something going on inside. Maybe they had a tragedy, something happened at home. When you have small kids and you're trying to get them ready for school, that's harass, I don't want to say a tragedy, but that's confusion and anxiety in itself, especially when you can have stubborn kids or strong-willed kids that you have to push out the door. By the time you get in your car or where you are going, you're frazzled. You're frazzled. You tried to have a good day. You tried to get your kids to go to school and for them to have a good day. But, some mornings it just don't work out that way. And everybody's a little frazzled. So I say, look at that. When you smile at somebody, they don't say good morning, you can say, oh, they had a bad day. Maybe their kids spilled the milk. They didn't want to wear that outfit. They wanted to wear the same outfit they wore yesterday that had chili on it. And they had a meltdown. And the parents still had to get them out the door to get them to school and try to be to work on time. Think about that. That's just a harrowing experience for anybody. So when I see people, especially females, that they don't have a smile, I I can imagine what type of morning they may have had.
It's funny she mentioned kids, Carolyn, you talked about the kids and stuff. And I completely understand what she's talking about, but not from my own experience. I know other people have gone through the problems that but I didn't have that problem. When my kids were growing up, I had two words: move it, move it, move it, move it. And up they got, and they got going because they knew I was coming right behind them. But I can understand what she's talking about. I see it with my daughter now, because she doesn't use the move it. I don't think she can use the same tone that I used. But it is kind of funny to sit there and think about what you were saying earlier about how people put their head down. Well, I like to look in people's eyes when I talk. So if someone's gonna put their head down, I don't even bother. Don't even bother.
You might as well be
They
talking
clearly
to a doorknob, huh?
well, if I'm walking and they're coming towards me and they put their head down, then clearly they don't want to talk. Okay. You don't want to talk, I'm not gonna say that. See you later. But if they keep their head up, then I'll look them straight in the eye and, hey, how you doing? You got, is the world good to you today? Something like that. Get a conversation going. Make them feel a little happier.
So in that event, when the person is looking down and you're coming, head to head with somebody, of course, you're not going to block them or anything like that, obviously. But if you just said good morning and you get a response of a good morning, that would be considered a good thing? And hopefully that cat doesn't have their tongue just for that one moment. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
possibility. That's
if
a possibility as well.
if I'm walking and my head is up and they're walking and their head is up, and then as we get closer, they put their head down, I don't even bother. Clearly, they don't want to talk. They put their head
100%.
down. It's a signal to you that, hey, I want to be left alone. So I leave them alone.
Mhm. We talked a little bit earlier about nonverbal communication, nonverbal conversation, and Carolyn explained it pretty thoroughly about that, how just listening. And the nonverbal communication, there's a thought there, but they're not expressing that thought, or else they wouldn't be squirming in their chair, their arms are folded, or whatever the case may be. There's communication happening, but nothing's coming out of the mouth, right? Or you have somebody who talks under their breath without expressing anything. And that happens quite a bit in meetings, especially if you're having meetings. And then when you ask them, hey, what do you think about this? I mean, it's happened to me even in Toastmasters on a committee. Hey, so what do you think about this? And all of a sudden, you're asking for input, you're asking for a contribution, whatever it is, however large or small, you're asking for them to participate in the conversation. And because of their nonverbal communication, whatever it is, and perhaps talking under their breath where nobody could hear us, or it could just be thoughts. When you ask them for that suggestion or to join in that conversation, all of a sudden, the cat has their tongue. They lose the train of thought. Have you ever seen that happen?
No.
Nope. I have. Carolyn, how about you?
I have seen that happen.
Yeah, so it
Well,
happens. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. Well, a person may lose they train of thought, or I guess, just they forget what they're gonna say, I guess.
So I guess it would be beneficial to, with respect to being part of a conversation or having a conversation, that if you're engaged, your train of thought will be there fresh. It's not something that you're going to lose rather quickly, like talking under your breath or just, arms or a deep breath, whatever the case may be. Even if it's something that in a negative context where they can provide constructive feedback, not, I think for myself, when a person has that and the arms crossed, it to me, it's like they have something to say, and we know it could possibly be beneficial, but we'll never know. And when we ask them at the time and they lose their train of thought, then it just comes out as, you might as well be giving it in Morse code or something, because they're not involved in that conversation.
Well, there's a difference between losing your train of thought and not talking. That's all. Even I've lost my train of thought at times. And I probably have one of the funniest ways of covering, because I always go, oh yeah, now I know what I was saying. So if someone loses their train of thought, you just give them time to come back,
Mhm.
just remind them what they were saying and have them come back. Especially if the conversation is important.
Mhm.
If you skip over them, then you make them, I don't know, make them feel less worthy. So it's always important to keep their importance to the conversation.
So essentially, Toastmasters can help practice practice and get those conversational skills. But what's really nice about Toastmasters is we can do it in a safe environment and practice and if you have skills, we can even refine them more. I know I need a lot of refinement, that's for sure. And just to keep practicing those fundamentals over and over and over again, so they can be applicable in all areas of my life. And I know that with the individuals we have here, Carol and Jim, that we know you practice. Here we are tonight practicing. We may not ever deliver a formal presentation, or we may never lead a team, or you may never lead a team for our audience. But every day is a conversation. We here at Toastmasters provide that safe environment, that safe space to practice. So we encourage you, come on in, join the conversation, practice, and refine those skills and reap all the benefits and success in all areas of your life. So come on and join Talents Unlimited every Wednesday at 7 p.m. right here. I want to thank our speakers this evening, our participants, and for a wonderful conversation, great input. Without you, we would just be talking to ourselves. But with you, we're having a conversation. So thank you to our participants, our fellow club members, and most of all, I thank you, audience, and I bid you a good night from Talents Unlimited Toastmasters.